and welcome to Our People, the podcast where we give space for Holdeman Stories. We focus on hope, healing, and inspiration. Connection, consciousness, and love are the driving motivations for this project. Remember to have grace for those who have chosen to speak out and share their experience. Please enjoy the story you will hear today.
Hello, and welcome to Our People's Podcast. Today, I am Amanda, but I have with me as host, because I'm going to tell my story, Starla
Hi, nice to meet everybody. It's such an honor to be here again.
and Jordie.
Hi, I am honored to be here too with you.
Thank you. So I asked these ladies, these beautiful souls, if they would interview me today. So I will just get into it and start my story. I was born in Phoenix and lived there until I was 10 years old. And then we moved from Phoenix. So my mom is from Phoenix. My mom is Hispanic. My father is Caucasian from Kansas. And my dad, when he proposed to my mom, I guess the minister that he took it to told him, well, I guess somebody has to marry them, meaning the Hispanics. He didn't think there should be interracial marriage. So anyways, my dad married my mom, and there's three of us girls. I'm the middle child. And we lived there in Phoenix. Okay, it was a mission church. My mother's family, Hispanic. So, our church had a good population of Hispanic members, things like that. And really very few outsiders. Now, if you would go to their church in El Mirage, there are few Hispanics and very many outsiders that have moved in. And by outsiders, I mean people from, Kansas and Florida and Michigan and all those places. So imagine, I grew up in a mission church, in a mission setting with my Hispanic family, and where, love and hugs all around, coming and going. Every time you came somewhere, you hugged them. And when you left, you hugged them again. And food was central to our lives. We went from that kind of a community to West Point, Mississippi. And talk about a culture shock. I was 10 years old, and it affected me quite a bit. So, whereas my older sister, just fell into a group, was accepted, and just went on. I was accepted too, that's not the thing, but she just went on and her life just bloomed. And then my little sister was too young to really care, And so then there was me caught in the middle. And I started lying. I had never lied up until that, never. And all of a sudden, here I was lying. Like, I got a whipping every year, just so you know, from the fourth grade on out, for lying. Except for that fourth grade one was really weird, and I should have never got whipping for it. But you know what? Apparently, she was having an off day, and she took it out on me, and I got spanked. And so then that was it. I did make a best friend, though. She was smarter than me, and her father was no longer a member. He had actually joined from the general population into the Holdeman community. And but he was no longer a member. And so I think she felt that difference, like that she was different. And then here I was, a little half-breed coming in. And okay, people called us that, so I'm sorry, but you know what I mean? Like, here I was, an interracial child coming in, and I think there was just this click. We just clicked, and we hit it off, and we became friends. And I loved going to their place because they lived on a ranch, and her mother had an acre garden, which I had never seen before because my mother did not garden. Obviously, in Phoenix, it would be slightly hard. Oh, well, we did have a garden, but it was tiny, and it was my dad doing it. Anyways, And so they had horses and cows and sheep, and it was just amazing. And I loved it. And I would spend my summers there and every weekend that my parents would let me. And so I just, yeah, we had a wonderful time. Her mother was always telling us that pretty is as pretty does. So I did not join the church at the normal regular age of, what is it, 10 to 13, 14, something like that. I in fact was 15 by the time the revival ministers decided to, really ask me one day when they were at our place, yeah, about my salvation. And I was like, okay. And he was explaining, because I was like, okay, but like what? Because apparently I didn't feel lost. I don't know. Because my mother never made us feel like that original sin thing. We didn't have that in our house. And so I wasn't I wasn't wanting. And, I wasn't shameful and sinful. And if I was, it was because of my actions, not because I was inherently sinful. So he kept talking about this, a born again experience and how it works. And I was like, okay, well, I literally told him, if you'll stop talking, I'll go try it, because I want to know, how did this work? And so then he did. He stopped talking, and I left, and um I went to my bedroom and I knelt down beside my bed and I prayed. Hey, God, like, I want to know. I want to know if you're there, if this is a thing, if it's true. Like, I would like to feel that peace in my heart. I'd like to know what this is about. Not that I felt necessarily unpeaceful, but I was a rebellious child, I guess, but only because I asked why all the time. So my mom didn't see that as rebellion. She answered my questions. She allowed me to have it. But there was just that consensus, I think, in the general population that I was strong-willed, and I was a choleric. Okay, I've known that since I was 13, when our neighbor down the road gave us a test one evening, and I found out I was choleric at 13. So anyways, okay, not a big deal. So you know what? I received peace. I believe that was my first time meeting, a higher power, and accepting that higher power into my life. And I think the key thing always is because I did it for me. I did it alone, by myself, and for me. I didn't do it for a purpose. I didn't do it to join a church. I didn't do it to please anybody. I did it because I really wanted to know what he was talking about. So, okay, so then I was baptized. And like I said, I was different. I didn't like weddings. Okay, I was not that social butterfly that here and yon and fro and to, could care less about that stuff. So my friend always drugged me to the wedding, so because she was interested in them. Anyways, my life went on and on. I got expelled, and then I got back in, and I worked with this girl whose father very unexpectedly passed away of a heart attack at, like, I think 56. And so there were 6 children in the family. It was very traumatic for everybody, I think. And they were a family that had moved in there. They had been also, not raised Holdeman. They had joined. They joined in Arkansas, though, and had moved now to West Point. And so I worked with her, and I went there to their place. And the first thing I saw that day, because he died on a Sunday, the first thing I saw was one of the daughters. She would have been the middle daughter. And so she was probably 7 or 8. Anyway, she was outside, and it was dark already. And she had her little friends were around her, but like, you could tell that she didn't, like, I mean, she had just lost her dad that day. And here she was. Her friends didn't know how to comfort her. They didn't know. You could tell all 3 of these girls were like just lost. And so I gave her a hug and told her, I loved Like I loved her and I was so, so sorry. And I talked to her for a little bit. And then I said, do you want to come inside to, to the light where it was? And she's like, no, she goes, I'm okay now. Okay. Okay. So I went inside but why I tell that story is because that has always been frozen in my mind that time, because that is what started me on a friendship with this family. And so I would go there and I watched after the funeral how, everybody was there for the funeral. And then the funeral was over and everybody was gone. And all of a sudden, here they were on their own, alone, without their dad. And it was just like, wow. Just like it was almost like that vacuum suction let go. And it just, the grief came just flooding in. So I would go there. The girl I worked with, she quit working obviously to stay home and help her mom and, be with the kids and stuff like that. So I would go over there on my, like after I would go to work during the day. And then afterwards I would go there. And it would be 6:15, 6:30 by the time I would get there in the evenings. And lots of times the shades were still pulled. There was still cereal on the table, milk on the counter. The beds were not made. The laundry was not done. Dinner wasn't started. Just their mother was drowning in her grief. So this is nothing on her. And it was just seemed like a house full of, lost children. So I would go in there with my big personality and make beds and clean up and start dinner. And the little girls were always so good at helping me and talking, and we would talk and, because their grief was different than the older siblings' grief and their mother's grief. Like it was different. They handled it differently. And I always just had the feeling they needed just someone to be able to just be with. So anyways, I became friends with all of them. Except for their oldest son didn't like me at all whatsoever because my personality grated against him. And I can absolutely see that. Except for I ended up marrying that son. So there's that. But before I married him, the staff asked me to stop going over there so much. Okay, no problem. So I did. And then they asked me to stop. Oh, just little by little was always stop, stop having so much to do with the boy, I think was the first thing. And then stop going over there so much. And then stop, like being friends. And I'm like, what? Like, what? Anyways, but we went through revivals, and I think it was at the revivals that they'd asked me to stop really being friends with that family. And I was like, well, okay. Except for on the night of revivals, the night of communion, which I was not raised this way. We would have never done this. So it was just one of those things that apparently was meant to be because it was so out of the ordinary. But we, a group of us went to, after communion, we parked his car and he got in with my sister and I, my little sister and I, and we went to a town 30 minutes away and met a couple who's now ministers in the Holdeman church. And we had coffee and cheesecake, had a really good time, came back, dropped him off at his car. I got out of the truck, gave him a hug, got in and went home. I gave him a hug like I would hug anybody because I'm Hispanic, right? We hug. Okay. Well, unbeknownst to me, someone saw us. An expelled person saw us. An expelled boy that was my sister's age saw us. And I get a phone call from the ministers the next day. And he says, look, we don't believe this. We're just checking in so we can say we did. No big deal. But someone saw you hugging this boy. Did you hug him? And I'm like, oh, my heart sank to my toes because I knew that if I was truthful and I said I did, that there were going to be consequences. And I knew that if I lied, I was going to have to turn around and make it right at some point because I am not a liar. So I just said, yes, that's exactly what happened. I said, but there was no bumping and grinding. It was a hug like I would give my dad or my grandpa. This was not a sexual hug. I was like hanging on by a thread here. And so he said, okay, I'll call you back. Before I know it, the quick alert goes around and says there's a members meeting tomorrow night. And I get a phone call saying, we are going to bring you up because we just worked with you and you seem to come through very well. And then this happened. So apparently there must be something wrong with your spirit. So I said, okay, go ahead. I'll see you there. So this boy was furious. He was furious because he knew there was nothing in that hug either. And he wasn't going to go. But I'm like, I am, because I have nothing to hide. And if I stay away, I look guilty. So I went to that members meeting. He did too. But and his family, they knew there wasn't either. Like they were not, hey, this should not have warranted a members meeting. But we went and they brought me up and they said it just like that. We worked with her and we thought that she came through and she had a beautiful spirit, but apparently not. And so what do you guys want to do with her? And so they're like, Amanda, would you like to say anything? And I said, yes, I would. And I stood up and I said, yes, I hugged him. But it was a hug like I would give my dad or my grandpa. There was no bumping or grinding or anything like that. I was fierce. So I said that in church because I didn't care. I thought if they could call a meeting for me to do this, they should actually know. And if their ears were too sensitive to hear there was no bumping and grinding, well, that was on them, not me. So we, there was silence, of course. And I said, but I went on and I said, but if you will let me go without putting any church discipline on me, I will move to California where I had taken my CNA, like, I don't know, several years ago or something, or a couple years or a year ago. And I'll move to California and work at Grace Nursing Home. Like, okay, but if I go without church discipline. So they're all silent there, for a minute. And then one of my friends a family friend of ours who was married already spoke up and he said, I think if Amanda is willing to change her life like this, that we should give her the confidence and allow her to go. So, okay, yes, they voted. That sounded good. So I left that meeting. I went to work the next day and I quit my job, put my 2 weeks notice in. I was doing pediatric dental assisting. I put my notice in and I waited out my 2 weeks. And on the last day of work, when I was driving home, I had a beetle, and I ran over a dog and it tore the whole undercarriage of my car out. And my car needed to go into the shop. So it did. And as God would have it, the universe would have it, not one part, but 3 times the parts came in wrong, broken, and didn't fit. So I waited for 3 weeks for my car to get fixed. And during those 3 weeks, all I can remember is laying on my bed, staring at my ceiling, going through my head about what was going to change in my life if I left the church. And finally, I actually whispered it to the mother of this family that I'd become friends with, right? And the boy I hugged. And I actually whispered it to her because I was not brave enough to say it out loud, as if somebody was going to hear me. We were at her house. But I whispered and I said, I think I'm going to leave the church. And she said, well, okay, then I think you will want to read these. And she disappeared upstairs and she came back down and she handed me 18 pages of Vivian Stoppel's papers with when they asked her to do the book for the One True Church, and she started doing her research and realized that this was not what the Bible meant by the One True Church, and she couldn't do it. And these were all of her reasons she turned in why. And so of course she got expelled for that. And so she gave me that. So I went and sat outside in their garden area and I read. and I read and I read and I wrote notes and I highlighted, and I was just shocked to see that that a that an an adult had wrote this out and put this together, and everybody knew Vivian Stoppel's name. It's not like she was some fly-by-night person. She had two other books that were well renowned in the church. So it was like somebody opened the door for me. And I was like, okay. So I called the staff and I told them I was going to leave the church. Actually, I said, take my name out of the church, because I feel like what you asked of me is coming from man for um a look, for it, because you want a certain look about your church, not from God. This isn't coming from God. That hug did not have any effect whatsoever on my salvation. So I want my name removed from the church. Poor Mark, okay? We love Mark Cohen, love him to death, Ori's boy, okay? Heart of gold. But he was young. This was his first go round, and no wonder they pushed me off on him, thought he could cut his teeth over here. Anyways, and he was like at a loss of words. He was like, okay. Anyways, turns out when he did expel me, he literally just said that she wants her name removed from the church. All those in favor. And so that was kind of, normally they like to say that you're got a foreign spirit or something. They make something up. And so, but no, there was nothing. He didn't do it. I'm sure Errol probably wanted to get his yardstick and smack him for that mistake, but he didn't. Anyways, so okay, I left the church, and so did this boy. And we lived our lives. He went to school for prereqs to architect there at a local community college. I continued to work. We got engaged. We were engaged for a year, and then we packed up and moved all of our belongings to Arizona, because he was going to go to ASU there to school. Dropped them off at our apartment, went on to Palm Springs, where both of his grandparents happened to live in the same golfing community, and we were going to get married there because the one set of grandparents were too old to travel. So we those women, though, when the grandmother's friends heard about our story and that my family would not be coming to our wedding because I left the religion, they insisted on coming to the wedding. They insisted on throwing me a bridal shower. Like they just stepped in. And it was like, okay. My family from Phoenix did come up. Some of my cousins that I grew up with that were like, my mom and her would be like sisters, even though it's my mom's niece. They were still like sisters. And so the girls and we grew up very close together. Anyways, but none of them were Holdemans anymore. The daughter had joined and then left. Anyway, so they all came to my wedding, and so did my Aunt Mary, which would be my dad's youngest sister. She was no longer a Holdeman. So they came to my wedding, and so I did have family. So we had a beautiful outside wedding on a golf. Amazing. Then we went back to Phoenix and, lived there, and he started school and I started work at a pediatric dentistry, and everything went well. And about a year and a half into our marriage, I believe, he informed me he didn't want to be married anymore. So I was like, okay, but never gave me a reason. Still to this day, I have no idea. I have my own ideas, but he never gave me a reason for why he wanted to be divorced. And I said, okay. It took me another year and a half to come to terms with it, to understand it. And by the way, I'm like, let's go to counseling. I started counseling couples. I called because at ASU, where he was going to school, they also have a psychology program. And so in the psychology department, they do therapy for like student therapy, the students will, and then they have their teacher look over. Okay. And so I called and I set up a couples counseling, marriage counseling. And I show up to our marriage counseling and he's on campus somewheres, right? He never shows up. And so Rebecca came and got me and took me back and she's like, well, she goes, I see you signed up for couples counseling, but where's the other part of this couple? And I'm like, somewhere's here on the campus. I said, but apparently not coming. She said, okay, well, what does that tell you? She said, let's make a plan for you. Because I said, I still want to do therapy. I said, so apparently now it's going to be individual. She's like, okay, let's make a plan for you. How long are you willing to stay in a situation like this? And I'm like, ooh, my hackles came up and I'm like, I will know. When I know, I will know. Okay, but and right now, it is not time. I am not ready for that step. We're not going there. We're not talking about that. Like I shut her down. Anyway, so she said, okay. So I think we talked about other things because of course there's plenty more to talk about, right? So we talked about other things. And by the way, during this time, I bought us a condo because I was working full time and he was working 1 day a week. Okay, so I bought us a beautiful condo in a beautiful part of Phoenix, and it was just lovely. Anyways, I worked 4 days a week, and on the weekends I would go to the other side of the valley, 45 minutes away, to my families, and I would be with them all weekend long, like because he wasn't home. He was always at school doing work. A lot of his projects, things like that, and who knows what else. So anyways, so one day I had called him. I was at work and I called him to make sure he had taken the HOA check into the office and he didn't answer. And I was like, when I'm sitting there, in the office, on the phone, and it's just ringing and ringing, and I know he's probably not answering if it's ringing this long. And I'm just like, this just welled up within me, and I'm just like, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. And then I clear as if a bell went off. I was like, and no, I am not going to be that kind of a person. I am not going there. So I kindly left him a message, asked him to call me when he had the chance. So he calls me. I mean, immediately after that, I went back to work. He calls me and I got back up and I went back and I answered the phone. And I said, did you take the HOA check in? Yes. Okay. I said, do you want to work on our marriage? And he said, no. And I said, okay, then you can move out because you won't be able to afford our place on your own and I can. So you're welcome to move out. And he's like, what? Oh, no. Okay. We'll talk about this. He says, like, what happened? Are you okay? And I'm like, yes. And he said, we'll talk about this evening when I get home. And I said, oh, I'm normally sleeping by the time you get home. And I said, and do you want to work on a marriage? No. And I said, then there is nothing to talk about. So by this time I had actually put myself through massage therapy school also at night. So I would do pediatric dental during the day and then I would leave and go to work in the evening. School in the evening, and got my massage therapy and loved it and learned a lot. And on hindsight, I do know that was a form of therapy that I chose. It was touch therapy. It was, I was opened up to a lot of modalities and ideas that I previously would have never been open to, correct? Or have heard about. I now put myself in a position to hear about these things. So, I do think he came home on time that night. And I just said, there's nothing to talk about. So if you do not want to work on a marriage, okay. But I loved him. Like, I still loved him. Oh my gosh. Year and a half later, after he told me he didn't want to be married, I still loved him. So he stayed there for another month. And finally I was like, you need to move out. You want a roommate that is never around. I don't want a roommate. Okay. I want a husband. And you don't want to be that. So you need to go. So he moved out to his mom's. And I stayed there for about another month, I think. And then, or 2 months, something like that. And then I called him 2 months and I said, hey, will you come stay at the condo? I'm going to go home for about a month and I'm back to Mississippi and I'm just going to see what I want to do with my life from here. And he's like, yeah, sure. I said, all the bills are paid. Like, just come and stay here. That's it. I mean, I don't even know why. We didn't have pets. I could have just closed up and gone, but apparently I couldn't leave my house like that. So anyways, we lived in a gated community. So we were the youngest people there, but that's okay. So he came and I left and I went back to Mississippi and I was there for about a month, I think. Anyways, but when I got there, I was angry with God because I said, I didn't do anything wrong. I loved my husband. In fact, I still love my husband. And you had one miracle. One miracle. That's all I was asking for. Something so simple you could have done because back then I didn't understand free will. Okay. So I'm like, you could have changed this, but okay, because you didn't. How about let's see how you do with two? Because basically, bye. I don't need you. You don't keep your word. I don't know what good you're for. So see ya. And I slammed the door on God and I went about my life. And things started happening in my life and I started laughing because I saw God all over it. And it would he would just ping that door and he would just shut that door. And then I would try to open a different door and he'd just ping that door and shut that door. And this kept going on and on and on. And I knew what was happening. Nobody else did. They were just like, I'm terribly sorry. Like this, I don't know why this is happening. And I'm like, I do. So anyways, when my month came to an end, I decided that, yeah, I was done. So I made the arrangements. We put the condo on the market. And I flew back out there to pack up my stuff. And my cousins, remember that I would go spend the weekends with every weekend. They were spiritual. And so, and I used to go to church with them and everything. And when I got there, I couldn't wait to see my cousin's husband because I mean, there was just this bond there. He was just an amazing, amazing, amazing man. Definitely, the divine masculine. He was just really, really wonderful. So, anyways, I saw him and because she was at work, I think must have been when I got there that day. Anyways, I just gave him a big old bear hug and I'm like, I am so glad to see you. And so I confessed my life. I think they were like, what? This took you 1 month to get here? And I'm like, yes. So anyways, we had a really, really great time. We went to, this little experience that happened, which was so interesting. We went to his mother's that morning because he's like, let's go talk to my mom because he was going through some things too. And he said, let's go talk to my mom. So we did. We drove to his mom's house and she's Hispanic. Okay. This little Mexican lady. She answers the door. I mean, he had to go around to her room and bang on her window. And then she came to the door. She's like, mijo, I was blow drying my hair. I never heard you knock. And so she said, but come in. She goes, I was thinking about both of you this morning. Both of you come in. So we went in there and we sat at her little round table that I think was, one of those spools that they do power lines and stuff like that. Okay, I'm pretty sure it was that kind of a table. So we sat there at the spool and they were talking to me about our souls. And, when we share ourselves with someone else sexually, how we give a part of our soul to them and vice versa. And so they said, so really, like you want to reclaim those pieces of yourself because they aren't theirs to have. And you don't want to keep the pieces of them that you have with you, their energy, I guess. And so I said, oh, okay. So I'm like, well, I'll pray right here, like, because I would like to be free of this energy that I was carrying around. And so I did. I, just did a simple prayer and told God I was sorry that I had learned my lesson and I wasn't going to shut him out anymore. And, I would like his wisdom back in my life. Okay. So life went forward, but I'm going to stop and actually I'm going to go back because there was an experience that I had when I decided to leave the church and I told them, and so I immediately went, I think, to wearing regular clothes, not my head covering, things like that anymore. And but the girls I worked with all went to the same church. They were having this motivational speaker come and speak to them. And it was going to be a woman's supper. The men were going to serve it. Like this was just a ladies thing. And okay, so yeah, I bought tickets. I asked my Mennonite best friend if she would go with me, and she said yes. I've been always grateful to her for doing that because it was this bridge that I needed. And so we went to this women's dinner with a motivational speaker. By the way, the motivational speaker drove me nuts. She had a very high-pitched voice. She was one of those really peppy people, and she would just kept bouncing around the stage. And it was a small room, and she was really loud. And she was saying, "Oh, there's only four door prizes left. Only four door prizes left. So if you want one, like you better pray because there's only four left." And I thought, lady, God don't care about a door prize. How stupid. But to prove you wrong, I'll pray for a door prize because I'd like one. So I prayed. Once again, the key thing to that being is that I really did want a door prize. Okay, so I really was asking for a door prize. As amen was leaving my mind, the lady in her shrill voice announces my name. And I'm like, I'm just sitting there, okay? Because God's over there dancing, laughing at me. And I'm just like, I got nothing. So all the girls around me are like, here, she's right here. And so they passed my door prize down to me. And I'm like, it was so beautifully wrapped and stuff. And I was so excited. And I'm like, thank you, God. And then I unwrapped my present to see what I had won. And it is this white and yellow glass something that it wasn't the base because there was no base to it. It was just rounded with a spout. And I'm like, what is this thing? So then I had to go read what I had just won, And I thought this serves me right for getting something that you don't even know what it is because you were sacrilegious over there. Well, it was like God tapped me and said, so Amanda, because what it was a watering bulb. So you fill it with water, you turn it upside down in your plant. As your plant needs water, it dries out, releases oxygen. The bubble goes up and it releases the water, right? So no valve, no anything, just the water comes out when the plant needs it, not just guzzles out all the time when the plant needs it. So it was as if God said, hi. So I do care about little tiny prayers, even as tiny as wanting a door prize. And I gave you this glass bowl because I want you to understand that I am here and I am bigger than a church. I am not just limited to the religion you were raised in. And I know that you were taught that if you leave me, but that is not the truth. I am everywhere. I am bigger than that. And if you will take me with you, I will give you what you need when you need it. Not before you need it, not when you want it, but when you need it. I will give you what you need. And so that was just like this. My confirmation that God was bigger than that religion, that he was everywhere. Nobody had a monopoly on God. Nobody could tell me that I didn't have God just because I chose to no longer be part of a church. So I went out in confidence to make my mistakes and learn my lessons. Anyways, so okay, so now moving on, and then that experience there at my cousin's mother's place. So I moved back to Mississippi and I lived there for a year. And then my divorce became final while I was there. And after that year, I said, okay, I'm good. I'm ready. I'm ready. And I actually moved back to Phoenix. And so I moved back to Phoenix. I moved over there back. I moved in with my cousins and lived there with them and started working. And life took off. And then 2008 happened, that the whole financial crash in 2008 happened and stuff. And I was out of a job. So I thought, okay, I'm going to move back to Mississippi and I'm going to go to school. I went ahead and made my arrangements. But I would temp for this dental group sometimes. And so one of my last weeks there, this tall, balded, shaved head guy walks in and is going to be is my patient. And I thought, oh, a Russian, look at this. He's handsome and fun. Well, it turns out he was not Russian. He was from Wisconsin. And he did photography as a hobby. And so did I back then. So we made a photography date. Because he said he would go downtown Saturday mornings, early in the morning and take photos. And so I'm like, oh, I'd love to do that. Okay. So he's like, you want to go? And I'm like, yeah, I'd like to go. So we made a date and I actually was waiting on that to go shoot photographs with him before I left. And then I was leaving like the day or two after that. Well, turns out I did not leave. And I ended up getting engaged to him and I ended up staying. I mean, not right away. Okay. I ended up moving in with him and I lived with him for about a year. No, a year, 2 years, 2 years. And then we got engaged and then we got unengaged because I wanted to move back to Mississippi. There were things in the relationship that I knew that I was not going to be okay with long term. And so I said, okay. But so I moved back. But prior to that, I was involved in church. I went to church there, went to church in Mississippi. I did all those things. And it was part of my healing and part of my journey of finding out who God was, not as I had been taught in that religion, but who God was that I guess other religions also saw him as. And it was a good growing and learning experience. So anyways, okay. So now jump back to unengaged and I moved back to Mississippi. And let's see, not much to tell. I went to school. Actually, I moved back to Mississippi for a job that came with a salary and a place to live. And then I was like, what? Anyways, so then I moved home with my folks. And but shocked, like this just all went out from underneath me, like the rug being yanked out from underneath me. I was starting all over again. Here I was. And I was like, oh, could not. So I moved back in with my folks. Thankfully, they only lived 45 minutes away. They came, my best friend came, my grandmother came, they packed me up in one day and I moved back home. And I was like, now what? So then I went to the community college and I, just to see if I could sign up. Classes were starting like in a week or two, like not long at all. And I was like, I don't know how this works and if I can even get in or anything like that. So I did. And I moved over there and I started taking prerequisites well, I didn't know for what, either for nurse or for paramedic. And I actually ended up going for paramedic and graduating and, doing that whole thing. But during the time at the end, like that my schooling was ending that summer, I got pregnant. And then the biological father was not going to be in our life. And so I packed a bag. Well, my sister, I was actually planning to move here to North Carolina because I've got a friend that lives in Raleigh. And so I was going to go move and become do my paramedic there and stuff like that, and work as a paramedic. But then when I became pregnant, I was like, so the biological father wanted to be back in it. He wanted to be part of our lives. And I'm like, okay, but like this last chance, if you walk away, like no more can do. Like you're done, because I'm going to have a child with me after this. And I'm not going to play this little game you like to play anymore. So, sure enough, true to form, 3 months later, he was gone and I was 7 months pregnant. And I'm like, okay. North Carolina just seems out. Like, I'm not going to go. Like, my sister was like, well, what does seem open? And I'm like, how about I come live with you? She's like, what? Well, okay, let me talk to my husband. Her husband was very choleric, type A personality also, but she strong-armed him. I'm pretty sure she did not give him a choice. She said, my sister is coming here, and that's going to be the end of that. So I packed a bag. Honestly, I packed 2 green army duffel bags, the big ones. I packed all of my daughter's clothes in there and mine, and I got on a plane. And I got to Oregon. And one of the stipulations for me living there with them was that I had to go to church. Okay, well, I didn't have my car because I took a plane there. So I went to Sunday school even. They were Holdeman. So I went to Sunday school. I went to church. They were very active socially. So we had lots of company over. And we did things. We went out to, church picnics and stuff like that, because they were a very small congregation at that time. And so, you know what? In between the pews on Sunday morning, I got a crash course on how to become a mother. These young girls would just excitedly talk to me about babies because they all had them, and I didn't know anything about babies. And I was like, I don't even know what this is. I'm carrying this child, but that's about it. I don't know anything else. I've never planned to have children. I know after my divorce from my first husband, I put children on the shelf. I wasn't going to have children. I was going to be me, and that was it. Okay. Only had to take care of me. I didn't have to take care of, meaning I didn't want my heart walking around outside myself. I didn't want to give someone else control of my heartstrings. And I had heard that that's kind of what children are like, watching your heart parade out of your body. And I didn't think that sounded very good. So, anyways, well, what do you know? I have this child, and she is just, adorable and beautiful and smart, and she's got these big eyes that just look up at me, and it's like, okay, well, now what? And I'm like, I don't know, kid, it's just you and me, just you and me. So anyways, I actually started working a month after she was born, and I had, and when she was 3.5 months old, I rented the little farmhouse right down the road from my sister. So the very next farmhouse on in this country road, I rented this little farmhouse. My sister and I flew back to Mississippi, packed all of my stuff into a U-Haul, and drove it back across country. Except for when we got to drive home back to Oregon, we're buckling up, and my sister says, "Oh, by the way, I don't drive." And I'm like, what? I'm like, so why did you come along with me again? I should have brought somebody that drove, not you. So anyway, she's like, but I make a good co-pilot. So off we go on the, like, what is it, 2,000 miles or something? It's a long, long way. So off we go. We made it. We had a good time. And when we get there, she'd already arranged all those mom girls that taught me how to be a mom on Sunday morning were all there waiting for us. We pulled in at like noon. I slept in that little farmhouse that night with my house completely put together, because those women helped me do it all. And it was amazing, and it was beautiful, and it was wonderful, and it was all my stuff again surrounding me. And it was just amazing, amazing. So anyways, I continued on, and it was good. Like, I needed that. I was completely over there on my own in that life with them, and it was good for me. And they kept my daughter 2 days a week, and my sister's husband's first cousin, okay, moved there. I moved there on November the 3rd. They came on November 15th. We had them over for dinner that night, and they walk in, and I am big and pregnant. And here they standing at the stove, making dinner. And here they came in, and they're like, "Hi, so good to meet you. We've heard so much about you. We already feel like we know you. We love you. We want to be as involved with this baby as you'll let us be." And I'm like, wow, okay then. So like it just instantly, it was just family. It was amazing. So Lynette and her girls kept my daughter 2 days a week. And then Grandma Julie kept her tens. And I had two wives. They took care of my child. They did my laundry. They cooked because I came home from work every day. And the meals were prepared, and they were like, "Well, are you staying for dinner?" Anyways, so it was just amazing. And then on the weekends, we did farm work around there and stuff. And it was good. It was good. It was fun. And my sister's like, "Why don't you date?" And I'm like, "Because I don't want to date." And she's like, "Well, shouldn't you have friends your own age?" And I'm like, "But I have a child, and I have a job, and I have y'all. And, I just don't really need anything right now." So, I had been friends with this boy since I was a kid. And since I was 15. And let the biological father be back into our lives that last time. And he had a hissy fit, pretty much stopped talking to me over that, just about. And um, anyways, but we talked throughout that year, and stuff like that. And well, turns out that he had his own spiritual awakening and decided that, what? He didn't want to be alone, but if he didn't want to be alone, he needed to change some things. And turns out that he had a really bad first marriage, and he realized he still had a lot of unforgiveness and hurt in his heart. So he said, okay. So I had invited him there for Thanksgiving, and he's like, "Oh no, 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 no. Like, that's too much of, like, what?" No, he had commitment issues of his own, like, massively. And so he's like, "Oh, I could never." And I'm like, "That's so weird, but it's for Thanksgiving, and I don't want to be alone this Thanksgiving. Like, I want a friend. That's my friend here." And so he said, "Okay, well, what do you know if one of my other friends didn't call me from Arizona, from Phoenix, out of the blue?" And he had just broken up with his forever partner, and he was devastated. And I said, "Wow, the Oregon countryside is a wonderful place to heal. So maybe you should come here for Thanksgiving and, just take some time to heal." And he's like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah, really." So he's like, "Okay." So the next day he texted me. He's like, "Were you serious?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So then he calls me the next day and he said, "And I have tickets. I will be here on this day." And I'm like, wow, hallelujah. So I tell my friend Jared, I'm like, "Okay, hey, like, George is coming to see me. I'm so excited." And he's like, "And we can't talk anymore." And I'm like, "What?" He said, "No, we cannot talk until George is gone." And I'm like, "What? You are so weird." Like, I could not understand what was wrong with this guy. And I'm like, I don't know. I know now that I know the whole story, I know exactly, because his ex-wife had had multiple affairs on him. And so he was like, "We're not talking." And I'm like, but at the time, right? I don't know any of this stuff. So I just think he's weird. But my therapist is like, "That's okay. Let him go. Don't talk to him, because, he doesn't know what he wants, and you do not need that in your life." So I said, "Okay." So anyways, we agreed to talk after my friend George left, the Monday after Thanksgiving. But this was 3 weeks before that we stopped talking. Okay. So we stopped talking, and unbeknownst to me, during that time, he has this, spiritual awakening where he gets down on his knees to just ask for this hurt and for forgiveness, and like for him to be able to forgive his ex-wife and stuff like that, and has this amazing experience where he says he cried and prayed and prayed and cried all day long, and the next morning when he woke up and the smoke had settled, he realized that he was in love with me. He had been in love with me for a while, but would never let himself go there because of the hurt in his past. So apparently he started telling already his son and he was going to marry me. She doesn't know it yet, but I'm going to marry her. And so, okay. So George leaves, and he texts, and Jared texts me at 6 o'clock that morning. And he's like, hey, when can we talk? And I was still mad at him 3 weeks later. Okay. So I don't answer him until 1 o'clock, till after I put George on the plane and he went back to Phoenix. And then I'm like, I said, I can talk tonight after I put Summer to bed. And he's like, oh, okay. No, he just said, okay. So that night, after I put Summer to bed, I poured myself a glass of wine and stopped to text him and say, okay, I'm ready to talk, or I can talk now. I walked the 10 feet to my chair and he calls, and I'm like, whoa, like this was not him. And I was like, were you sitting on the phone? And he's like, no, hi, how are you? How's it going? And I'm like, good. And he said, okay. He goes, if you're going to break my heart and move to Phoenix, tell me now. And he goes, because I'm in love with you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. And I'm like, what? What happened? I'm like, can you repeat that? I made him say it all over again. And he's like, okay. So then he tells me what happened. And I was like, ooh. He said, so I want to meet you in Mississippi at Christmas time, because this was after Thanksgiving, right? He says, I want to meet you in Mississippi at Christmas time. I want to meet Summer, just make sure this is something that you want and that this is that you still feel this way. And I said, okay. He says, if that goes well, then I would like you to come out here and see where I live, and and then see if you can see yourself being a part of this. And then if that goes well, then I would like you to move out here. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'll see you in Mississippi, because that's a lot all of a sudden for this boy that was so non-committal. And so he comes out the day after Christmas, and Summer took to him like she had always known him. There was no separation. No, he was a stranger. There was none of that. And so it was like, wow, okay. So my sister was, she had a lot of feelings about this, because that was like, Summer was basically, their child. Is that her child? It was her child. Anyways, so she told me what she thought about it, very unhappily. And then I just said, okay. And she says, but with that being said, I want to be part of it. And I'm like, okay. So she's like, but I think you guys should get married because you guys know better. And he has a son and you have a daughter. And I don't think that you need to not be married. You know better. And I'm like, okay. So I text Jared. I'm like, Lynette thinks we should get married. He's like, I've been thinking the same thing. He said, you go ahead and pack a dress and I'll take care of all of the details. And I'm like, okay. So I packed a dress and I bought a dress, and I got a ring, bought him a ring, and I packed him. And Summer stayed with Lynette, and I flew out here. And he had arranged the whole thing. We got married in an adorable little chapel. The lady was amazing that ran it and owned it and facilitated it all. And we had a wonderful, wonderful little wedding. My friend from Raleigh came, her and her son, they were the ones, well, she officiated, she didn't officiate, she was, our witness. Lynette and my daughter watched on via Zoom. And we had a wonderful little wedding. And then we went away to the beach for our honeymoon, came back here and worked on the house for back to Oregon to get all of my stuff and collect my child and move out here. And wow, was that something? So, but I mean, Jared was just this complete different person that I had never, ever like witnessed before. He was amazing, and he was just kind, and all my every need was already taken care of or thought of before. And it was just, I had never had this before. I was like, this was completely new to me. So anyways, we moved back here, or got back here, and he had a son who was 14 who did not like the idea of his father getting married. And we had lots and lots and lots of issues with him. And then he and the son ended up actually being in a scooter accident and getting a traumatic brain injury. And a lot of things ensued after that. He was in the hospital for 45 days. Then he came home. He was wonderful for 3 months. And on the night before his 3-month checkup, he completely switched and became angry, and just, which they say is very, very normal with traumatic brain injuries, due to, actually, they say it's due to the gut health and the communications and stuff, and that is very common. So anyways, he ended up running away 7 times. I mean, calling DSS on a so child everything. And he ended up, the last time he ran away, he went to his mom's, which was the first time, because he didn't have a good relationship with her at all. But that was the first time he went to his mom's. He ended up moving in with her, and Jared had full custody of him, had it since he was 28 months old. So we packed up his stuff and took it over there. Well, actually, we took it to the farm, and she came and picked it up because she wanted a neutral place. And so she picked it up from there. We never saw her. We just dropped it off. And I could not believe he was doing this, but he did it because he was, wow, something. Well, what do you know? 2 months later, after he leaves, I get pregnant with my youngest daughter. And so that was interesting because, didn't know I was going to have the first one. Didn't know I was going to have the second one. I had two volunteer babies, and they're amazing and wonderful and smart and just their own personalities. And I love them. And they're the best thing that could have ever happened to me. I'm so glad it did. And we have a great relationship. Jared, I think, sometimes wonder what was he thinking getting married. He had his bachelorhood, he had his sailboat, and he gave it all up to be a family man. And but it's good. He works on the farm with his father. They raise hybrid bass. So he works right down the road from us, and the girls go and come as we wish over there. And things are good. Things are beautiful. I love them. I've got a great life. I love my life. I am so thankful for all of the opportunities, for all of the lessons I've got to learn, and that I have been presented with. I love doing this podcast. I enjoy it. It gives me an outlet for, I guess, a creative outlet, so to speak. And yeah, so I think that's about all I've got. You girls have any questions?
Wow, thanks for sharing. What a beautiful story.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great, Amanda. Good listening to you again. And I know you've said this before in some of our conversations about your mom. Not that you didn't grow up with this kind of original sin guilt that so many of us have in religious communities. Was that, like, her ability to answer your questions and all that too? I right away thought of generational trauma, right? When you were talking about that. Did your mom not grow up with religiosity, or was that just because her culture allowed that, or how did that happen that she had that wisdom?
So, I think it's several things. They would have been Catholic, but not they. I mean, she remembers going to Catholic church, I think once or twice in her whole entire life, kind of thing. So they were Catholic by default of their culture. Um, her mother was 42 when she was born. Her father died 2 months before she was born in a tragic motorcycle accident. So then she would have been, coming to this world 2 months later to a grieving mother. Um, she has quite a few older siblings. Like, in fact, she's got nieces and nephews that are older than her, kind of thing. And so she would have grown up very well with a mom. To hear her cousins talk about it, like at 13, her mother still washed her hair for her and kind of thing and things like that, And so, she was the baby in a Hispanic family. She would have been the baby all along, pretty much. And so, and then on top of that, though, I come from a line of wise women. My mother is very wise. She has prophetic dreams. My grandmother was very wise. She she had abilities, um, psychic abilities, you know, but I don't know to what extent. I just know that they were there. And so I just think that yeah, she didn't grow up with that religious um and then also I do believe the culture. I mean, Hispanic people love their babies. Their babies are a gift from God. There's nothing else in it. So I think that that would have also played a massive part into it all.
Yeah, that makes sense. I just find it so beautiful. I am enjoying my grandchildren in that way that, to see little children being given choice, even in how they view God. It's to me, it's just the most beautiful thing because then, even as you said, when you experimented with God, if you will, that when you decided to do all this, it was because you chose that. It wasn't because it was being put on you, even though they were trying to, right? There's a massive difference in just how you view yourself as well when you can do these things from your own choice instead of from the pressure of others. It's just so beautiful.
Absolutely. That free will, and like I had said earlier on when I was talking about my first divorce, like I didn't understand free will, but we all have free will. That would be against the laws of the universe to step in and to sway anybody in any which way like that. Like, we're all here to learn our own lessons. And actually, I am very thankful to my first husband, very thankful to him, because he gave me one of the greatest gifts in my life. Because by the divorcing me, by the tearing down of my marriage, all of a sudden I was everything we were told we were going to be if you left the church, right? You were going to be divorced and wrecked and marriages and all these things. Well, basically, he handed me a clean slate. And because of that, I got to build my life exactly how I wanted to. I got to become the person I wanted to. And by that, I mean, I wish, I had known more back then than I did, but that's okay. I had picked up and said, okay, well, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? And you know what? I went on in life and I was hungry to learn to experience things I had never experienced before. I was a pro at online dating. I loved it. It was so much fun. I loved the questions. I would do the whole question and answer thing, and questions are my love language, and it was just so much fun to me. So much fun to me. So that's how I looked at first dates. They were just an experience to go on. Not a big deal.
And I just love that because to me, with the programming and conditioning that we've grown up with in such a closed culture with religion, to come around and have this understanding now that our reason for being here on earth is literally to experience and to learn. That's what it's for. At least that's how I look at it. And so that takes the fear out of it, right? Okay, that sounds interesting to me. Let's go see what happens if I follow this trajectory, right? And there's no right or wrong. It's just, I want to see if this feels right to my soul. And if it doesn't, I can pivot and try something different. And there's just incredible freedom in that.
Yes, absolutely. And I was made aware of this not that terribly long ago, that people with a lot of patience actually have a hard time pivoting. But those that maybe are a little on the shorter side of patience are very quick to pivot. They can pivot and they can go in a direction. And so I would fall under that one. My husband falls under the other one, bless his heart. And so, yes, I just pivoted. I could jump in feet first. And if it didn't work out, well, you know what? I still had those feet to walk away with. So yeah, I've had great experiences. I've had fun in my life. And it was so interesting to me to hear Bruce, the ex-fiance, that wasn't raised anything to do with Holdeman. I mean, didn't even really, I don't think, know what that was until I took him to church for the very first time, because my parents had come out to Arizona to visit, because they have family there, right, and friends and everything. So they had come out to visit, and they stayed, of course, with the other family, because we weren't married. They were not going to stay at our house. And so I said, well, we're going to go to church, and then we're going to go to some family members for dinner afterwards, and they're going to sit us aside. Okay, so you just need to understand that. And they're doing that because I'm expelled. I said, and that if you have any questions, feel free to ask me, because I'm here to answer. I said, and then at church, so either you can sit with me or I can sit with you, or you can go with the men and I'll go with the women. I said, however you want. And he said, okay. He goes, let's do it their way. I'd like to see this. And I'm like, okay, no problem. So we went to church, and I mean, to hear him tell it later to his family was, we walked in, it was a plain building, but when you walked in, like, there was nothing on the walls, and the ministers sat at the front, and the women sat on one side and the men on the other. It was like a Quakers meeting, and nobody talked. Even the children were well behaved, and we sang songs a cappella. There were no instruments. He said, and then we went to her cousin's house for dinner. It was my dad's cousin, so Caucasian, okay? So we went to her families for dinner. He said, and we had our own little table. He said it was supposed to be like a reprimand for her because she's not a member anymore. He said, but we were served like kings and queens. He said, we got our own dishes of food. They made sure we were served first. Our tea never got half empty before it was refilled. He said, like, it was amazing. And I was like, oh my word, I've never looked at it like that. That is hilarious. So it was very good, because even in that, like, he helped me to see that fun, different side of it.
An outside perspective, hey?
Yep,
It's sometimes very valuable.
absolutely. It's so much fun. If you have the same all the time, I mean, then you forget to look at it from different angles.
Yeah, and there's power in reframing so much of what's happened as well. Like, we know what's behind the things that are done, right? Like, you even brought up that so many of the things that they say and do is to support their image. And so we know the principle of the things that are being done. We know why setting aside is supposed to be hurtful, and it's a bit of an alienation, which is psychologically very damaging. But then when you take and reframe it from the other perspective, where all that emotion and programming isn't involved, then sometimes it's easier to separate yourself from it and not carry that negativity with it. You can actually find humor in it to a point, right? when you realize that it's it's not a God-given punishment, it's a man-given punishment, and so people can do what they want, kind of thing.
Yep, absolutely. My family, um, they don't set us aside. In fact, they pretty much stopped after I had my daughter. And then after we were married, I mean, when I say set aside, there was a crack in the table, kind of thing. His family sat us almost in the other room to begin with. And I was like, oh, what is this? But you know what? After a couple of years of that, Greg Dick was here for revival ministers one year, and someone asked him to speak on the avoidance. And so he said, oh, okay. So he did. And he said, it's as simple as saying, like, you guys are planning a birthday party and you don't really know what to do. He said, just say, let's go out to dinner. He said, that is enough of a reminder. That's all you need to do. And I guess my father-in-law told us this story, okay, when he was asked us, when he asked us if it was okay if they sat us at the table, because Greg Dick had said, you want to do it in love. And if you cannot hold the avoidance in love, do not do it at all, because you are doing more harm than you are good. So my father-in-law said, I realized I have not been holding the avoidance in love. He said, so until I can get there and I can hold it in love, he said, we would like to sit you at the table with us. And that was 3 years ago, maybe 4. And that's been it. We sit at the table. We have a wonderful time with them. Like, it is none of that. And I can definitely say that I have seen a difference in them. And I would think now that he could do it in love, but probably because of the love, he chooses not to do it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's amazing what love will do.
Mm-hmm. I also, sorry, I'm just doing a lot of talking here. It's just, this was so interesting what you shared, and well, you didn't call it soul retrieval, but you were talking about visiting your grandma, was
No,
it?
it was his mother, his Hispanic
Okay.
mother.
Okay, there you go. And just talking about that energetic exchange, right? And when it is a sexual exchange, it does go deeper, I believe, but we're always energetically exchanging with each other, and sometimes being unaware, we have no idea the impact that can have on us. But I know I've done that, like after my divorce, I have done soul retrieval through that, and even some of the other intimate connections I've had, or even just friendships, where I find that I'm dreaming about the person in a negative way, or I'm having somebody's in my thoughts a lot, but it's more negative, then I'll even just kind of do my own. I didn't do a prayer. That doesn't work for me, as far as just this, just because of all those years doing a prayer out of obligation. But yeah, definitely, and doing a meditation and a visualization of letting that energy go, and then taking back what I had voluntarily given to someone. It's pretty powerful, really.
Absolutely. And you bring up a point where you said prayer doesn't, using that doesn't work for you. Okay. So actually, in my years of healing and therapy and deconstructing, I actually came to a place where I could not call God God. I couldn't do it, because anytime I did, all I could think about was the punishing God we grew up with,
Mm-hmm.
and so I stopped calling God because I couldn't do it. So I called it, universe, or source. And it really now, it's interchangeable. But I know what I'm speaking of when I speak of it, and that's that. Um, so, you know, and that source is loving. Like, it is a loving energy that we were created from in the light, in the image of this energy. So, which means I have that same love, that God self, that fractal image. I am a fractal image of that divine energy, and it's within me. And I get to share it, and I get to be as much like it as I can be, because that is what brings me happiness and joy. I like to be in the flow of that divine love. I don't, I'm not interested in this judginess or this placement of people and things and actions. Like you said, we are all here to learn lessons. And that's what it's about. You know, my children have the freedom to ask. They have the freedom to express who they are. Some people think that I should curb, especially my oldest child, a little bit more, and I shouldn't give her the freedom to be who she is. But I'm like, no, my mother gave me the freedom to ask why all the time. My child is seems to be more intelligent than I was, and so she actually comes back at me with, reasons or this or that. It's not just why, it's but, and then she'll tell me, and I'm like, okay. My husband has a hard time with that because he would still be, a little bit more, those children are supposed to be heard or seen and not heard. And I'm like, and that does not work in our house. That is not how my girls and I are going to be. And so I think sometimes he dreams about living on a sailboat.
It's really quiet on the sailboat.
Very quiet on the sailboat. So, but good things, beautiful things. And life is what we make it. And if you don't like something, then take a moment, take a week, take a month, take a year. Look at what you don't like, see what you need to change, because we are only in control of ourselves. We can only change ourselves. And if we're in a situation we don't like, then remove yourself from that situation, as long as it's, in a healthy way, hopefully, safe for everybody involved. And then move forward. Find like selfishness when it's happening, but that's not what it is. It's everybody finding their own path and and being true to themselves. And there is a selfishness. That is one thing. But when it's done out of that divinity, it's not selfish. It is self-healing, it is self-care, and it's self-love. And that is not something we were raised with or taught how to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you don't have any more questions.
No, it was very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. Looking forward to this. It's amazing.
Absolutely. And thank you both for holding space, for being here, for allowing me to tell my story to you. And so I really appreciate that. I think you are both beautiful souls, and I'm so, so blessed to have met both of you on this journey.
Yeah, feelings mutual.
Absolutely. It was so good to hear you.
Thank you. Well, with that, I'll end it, and thank you so much once again.
Thank you for listening. It is an honor to connect with our guests, and we wish the best for them as well as our listeners. Remember to like and subscribe for more episodes. Our People can be found on all major podcast platforms as well as YouTube. If you are interested in sharing your story, please contact us at ourpeoplepodcastteam@gmail.com. Thank you.